This is Gay News Radio with Brandon Carmody, featuring Roddy Biggs, Samuel, Laura, and Special Agent J.
You're listening to Gay News Radio. I'm your host, Brendan Carmody. We are gathered up here today with a mini panel. We have Special Agent J and Samuel Laura, and we're on a special occasion today in support of National Coming Out Day. In cooperation with the Trevor Project, we are going to share some of our real coming out stories with the listeners today. So, both of you gentlemen, welcome back to GNR.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody.
All right, so we're going to start with question number 1 of our coming out survey, starting with Samuel Laura. At what age did you start questioning your sexuality, or did you notice a same-sex attraction?
Yeah, it wasn't a questioning. It was definitely a noticing. I remember being extremely young in comparison to most people. I remember vividly being around 5 and being aware of it. So, and it wasn't necessarily a sexual attraction, obviously, but yeah, I knew that I was different from what everybody kept telling me I was. So, yeah, around 5 for me.
Okay, all right, that's fascinating. Thank you. Special Agent J, same question. At what age did you start questioning or noticing a same-sex attraction?
I would have to say that my perception is very, very similar to Samuel's on this matter, because I knew in elementary school that I preferred the company of the other boys, but they were more often than not uncomfortable with my advances, so I typically hung out with the girls. And I don't know if that's sort of an attachment to an effeminate or feminine quality, because I really don't consider myself that way, but just that they were more receptive. And but yeah, I definitely knew that I had a desire to hang out with the boys more than the girls.
All right, I can understand that. Thank you for sharing. Now just sharing for myself, I can tell you that I definitely noticed that something was going on between age 12 and 13. And I realize that coincides with puberty, so that really shouldn't be a huge surprise. But something definitely hit my radar, per se, during ages 12 and 13 for myself. So question number 2, going to start with you, Jay. Do you remember anything that may have helped you realize your orientation? Examples being like a hot celebrity, perhaps a movie that you saw, a song that triggered something, or any friends or classmates you went to school with, anything that helped you realize your orientation?
Well, I will say that my first experience was someone that I did go to school with. I'm not going to disclose ages at this point, but let's just say we were both underage and both consenting, and it was a neighbor of mine, and I was about 8 years old, and that pretty much sealed the deal. I was like, okay, yeah, the door is open, and the business is operational.
Okay, very good. Any thing that you particularly remember striking you as far as celebrities, movies, or songs that helped you realize, or was it the neighbor specifically?
Oh, you're going to laugh, but for whatever reason, Jean-Claude Van Damme actually turned me on way back in the day.
Yes. I concur.
Really?
That was a big part of my upbringing. Like Saturday afternoon movie that they used to play, a lot of Jean-Claude. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Not so much anymore, but back then that was my thing, because my dad was always watching like the Van Damme movies and whatnot. So
weird.
I'm not laughing. You kind of surprised me. All right.
Well, I also had a thing for Patrick Stewart, because bald men are sexy. So Captain Picard was another one.
Wow. Amazingly, I agree with you. Picard was pretty hot. All right, so we do need to move on. So we're going to kick it over to Samuel. Samuel, I'll read the question again. Do you remember anything that may have helped you realize your orientation? Examples, hot celebrity, movie, song, or any friends or classmates you went to school or played with?
Well, Patrick Stewart didn't do it for me then, but he does for me now. So just putting that out there. Well, I was brought up in a different culture, not with a lot of American stuff outside of the whole Jean-Claude Van Damme movie on Friday, Explorer Saturdays. There was a little group of boys who had a band when I was growing up, and my sister and all the female neighbors were all into it, and they would get together in each other's houses and look at the posters and pick their boyfriends and stuff like that. And that's my memory at 5. That there was the youngest one who I thought was cute, not sexy, because at 5 you don't think about that, but he was cute. And I remember thinking, holy crap, I also feel like these girls my age and a little bit older are feeling, but I can't voice it. So that's my memory at 5 of having that struggle already. But I also had, probably before the age of 10, I had 2 close friends of my age, and we started sort of exploring each other's bodies. I think one of them had been surrounded by maybe some older kids who then, I don't know, exposed them to something. I remember one of them came into my house and he's like, "Do you want me to show you something?" And then you sort of start exploring, and it was, it's sort of this safe, silly, everything's disgusting kind of phase anyway. So it's not like it was anything super sexual. But yeah, I remember kind of exploring that part of me that I thought, oh, maybe this is what it means for me from now on. So yeah, those are my 2 experiences that kind of do that. But I'm sure I saw movies or musicians that I liked at that age. It's just, when you're prepubescent and you're already considering all those things, it's interesting because then it's not really based on a sexual attraction necessarily. So I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, but that's really fascinating that you had such a realization. And on an interesting parallel, maybe you can both help me out. Didn't Jazz Jennings, the 14-year-old famous transgender girl right now, didn't she realize at 5 or 6 that she was transgender? Didn't she have that realization around that same age?
Oh,
I believe so.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about all these things, it's so abstract. We like to think that gender and sexual attraction is really linear, but it really isn't. And so there's a myriad of things that affect that intention or that reaction. It could be chemical, it could be the setting, it could be upbringing, so many things. So it sort of shapes you as you go, and so your idea of yourself is what it is at any age, I would think.
Yeah. I want to give you both my answer. It's a 3-parter, so bear with here. This will be worth it, the price of admission, I promise. So, A, there were a lot of athletic types in my friend circle, and they like to play sports shirtless, and I swear I could literally hear Etta James singing in the background, "At last, my love, come along." It's just, wow. I mean, the athletic guys and the shirt, the whole thing, just that was a huge coming of age moment for me. But there were 2 movies that really messed me up, quote unquote, on the questioning side of things. And here's the 2 movies. Number A, Buffalo Bill. My dad set up a VCR in the living room in 1991 and put on a movie called The Silence of the Lambs. And he told me to watch it from start to finish, and then he left the room. So when Buffalo Bill...
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Samuel. How's it going?
Hi. It's going well.
We lost Brandon.
I think the censors just got into his story.
Must be. All right. Well, I'm going to hang up and then call him back.
Okay. Bye.
Talk to you in a second.
Oh my gosh. Hello, are you still there?
Yeah,
we are now.
It's the Sprint, damn it. Okay, sorry, I'll tell the story again so I can edit it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to have to repeat. Okay, so there were 2 movies that really messed me up, you guys. Number 1, Buffalo Bill. My dad set up a VCR in the living room in 1991, and he put on a movie called The Silence of the Lambs, and he told me to watch this thing from start to finish and then immediately left the room. So when Buffalo Bill talked, and sang the song Wild Horses, it seriously messed me up, man. I'm not even kidding. Buffalo Bill freaked out my internal sexuality. Okay?
I can see that.
And I realize that movie freaks people out for, all the other dark stuff. But let me tell you, the sexuality part of it really caught my attention.
Well, you should read the book. It's a lot more graphic.
Nope.
I'm terrible at reading books. Sorry. That's why I'm writing 2 right now. So, movie number 2, Legends of the Fall with Brad Pitt. When I saw Brad Pitt in Legends of the Fall as Tristan Ludlow, I knew that I was gay. There was no longer any questioning that Brandon Carmody was gay. Brad Pitt was simply the hottest male ever, and that just sent electricity through me. So can I get an amen from anyone else on Legends of the Fall, Brad Pitt?
Amen.
All right. That's what
I'm gonna say Fight Club before I'll say Legends of the Fall, but yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, Special Agent J, question number 3. So I think you've already answered this, but did you act on any of the feelings that you had when you were feeling, yourself questioning at the time, or did you experiment?
I was a horny little turd back in the day, and every opportunity I could get, I seized because I just knew, and I have an insatiable libido, so it's just like, whatever I could do.
So I'll call that a yes. That's a yes.
Good for you.
Okay. Well, Samuel, I realize you sort of answered this earlier, but did you act on your feelings and experiment?
Well, beyond that moment with that friend that was sort of like excited about showing me something that I didn't know at the time, I actually didn't really, because I was, again, probably around 9 at that time, and it's not something that I necessarily initiated. So I can say that my answer is the same. I did not have consensual wanted sex until my boyfriend of 2 years, and that was after I was 18. So no, I can't say that I experimented a lot, but I think I knew. I mean, for me, it wasn't as much of the sexual part as my whole way of seeing the world and seeing myself. Sexuality was just like a portion of that. So yeah.
Okay. So staying with you, Samuel, at what age did you officially come out to your family and friends?
Oh, geez. I was 14 when I told my parents, and that was interesting. But yeah, I was 14, and then beyond that, I started telling my friends slowly, depending on the type of friendship that I had. By the time I was out of high school, anybody who asked, I would tell. So, yeah, but it started all at 14.
14. Okay. Special Agent J, what age did you officially come out? And I think that you have a story about what happened, how that happened.
Yeah, I was about, I would say 15, about the same age. I honestly don't recall exactly how old I was at the time, but I do know I was in my mid-teens. And I had found this men's group that met at a local Methodist church, and it was a gay men's support group, and it was all ages. I mean, anybody was welcome. And I made friends with a man who is a local police officer, and went on ride-alongs with him and got to know him and got to realize that, you don't have to be limp-wristed, lisping, sissy, whatever. You don't have to fit the stereotype to be gay. I mean, this guy is someone that can point a gun at you and get away with it, so I thought that was kind of hot. And then there came a time when, I was really struggling. I had kind of tested the waters with my mom. I said, hey, what would you do if I came out as gay? And she said, oh, you would go right into religious therapy and, reparative therapy, whatever, and just tried to scare the gay out of me. But, I just knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew there was nothing I could do to change it. So I had this very, very intense internal struggle. And I had made friends through the instant messenger that has gone the way of the dodo, ICQ. And he lived in Washington, and I actually saved up money to fly up there to meet him and that was one of my first experiences. But he caught wind of the fact that I was having an emotional struggle and was not dealing with it very well, and so he contacted the local authorities, and my friend, the police officer, caught the call coming in that, this address, which he recognized. He came and picked me up, took me to the hospital where my mother happened to work at the time in the phlebotomy department, which is where they take the blood and they sample it all out and study it and analyze it. And so my mom comes down to the room where I'm in the ER, and she says, "What's going on? What's this all about?" And I stand up and I say, "Mom, I'm a fag. I like get used to it." And my friend...
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
It's okay. My friend, the police officer, puts his hand over his eyes like, that's not how you come out to your mother. But, the cat was out of the bag. And, from what I understand, everybody had already suspected anyway. I just hadn't confirmed it. So it really wasn't that big of a deal, save for the fact that my grandmother was going through chemotherapy for leukemia at the same time. So I caught a bit of flack for that. But, bad timing. However, what was I going to do? I put it off another year, another 2 years, another 5 years. Just, I just got tired of hiding it. It's, either accept me or don't. And so the end result is my family wholeheartedly accepts me, and they accept my husband. In fact, I think he's more of part of the family than I am. We're currently taking care of my 85-year-old grandfather, cleaning up his house, making sure he's all right, because he lives alone and not exactly in the best of health. And so my husband and I are the two people that he trusts to come over and help him out. And it's actually quite a blessing. Yeah. He's a really cool guy. But yeah, the family.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that there's support there. I would have to say that I didn't officially come out ever, but I'd had something happen at 17. I had, as you probably both suspected, I had dated and experimented with girls, and I had a particular large-scale relationship with a girl when I was 16, where marriage was discussed and a lot of involvement between the two families, and then a massive breakup. And when you're 16 and you've had your first relationship and all these things are involved, emotions can really go asunder. And that's something I'm going to want to talk to you both about as it relates to teenagers in a little bit here. But it really affected me tremendously on the depression scale when I had that breakup. Now, remember, I was 17, so an older man, and we're talking older than 25, came into my life to pick up the pieces and tried to date me at that time. And I sort of went with the flow, not even taking things into account, like laws maybe being broken or whatever was a factor there. So at one point, this individual tried to take me across state lines to go see a dying family member that was out of state. And my mother threatened to call the police. And I ultimately went into hiding with this individual because she had threatened to call the police. And so it turned into a really hostile showdown between me and the guy and my parents, who were demanding that I flee and get away from him. So it was just really unpleasant how hostile they were to me when I briefly dated an older man when I was 17, but I appeased them. As soon as that relationship ended, I went back to women for a few years in an attempt to go their way or wash away the gay. So that's kind of what happened to me the first round. There's multiple rounds in my coming out story. Samuel, the next question for you is, how did your immediate family and friends react when you came out to them? Were they accepting? Did they freak out? How did they take it?
My family was very supportive in different degrees at different times. I told my mother first, and then she told my father, and then we all conversed for about a 2-week period every night until I realized that on my dad's side, he felt that, it was a really tough path and that he would try to help me as much as he could to derail from it. So when he got to a point where I felt that he was leaning toward maybe having somebody talk to me about this, I just very frankly told him at 14, I didn't tell you as a means for me to say that I was confused. I was kindly sharing who I am, and I am not asking for your permission. I'm just telling you. So if this is the journey of this conversation, then the conversation is going to end, because I'm not here to talk this through unless you want to be more supportive. And so I think at the time he struggled with my sense of independence, because he's like, I'm your father. You should pay attention to what I say. And I wasn't in that place. So then we stopped talking, and then my parents argued about it for a long time, and then it became the elephant in the room. Nobody talked about it for a while. But eventually, they were very supportive. With friends, different things, because I was a freshman in high school. And after that, a lot of people that age go through all these different phases. And I had some friends, specifically male friends, sort of decide like, oh, you and I are too close and I care too much about you. I don't want other people to think I'm also gay, so I'm not going to be your friend. So, you go through that process of people not knowing how to deal with it and fearing their own existence. But, it was interesting because the reason that I told my parents was that my dad found out that I was looking at gay porn on the internet. So it wasn't the most comfortable place where to start. So at the beginning already, I think my dad was uncomfortable about what that all meant, and uncomfortable by the fact that he and I never really had a sex conversation about anything. So the fact that I was already exploring that on my own probably made him feel really uncomfortable. And so I think that was that. But, my first boyfriend actually moved in with us eventually. So my dad came around.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I felt like it was a lot of work, because I felt like, I was learning who I was at the time and teaching them as I learned. And so I know that I did a lot to make that happen, but at the same time, I was also very fortunate that they were able to meet me halfway. And it was their idea, actually. I was dating this guy for months and months and months after high school. I was starting college, and he was pressuring me to move out with him in his apartment, and I kept telling my parents, like, oh, he keeps asking me to move out, and they said, I don't want you to do that and not pay attention to school and all that stuff. So over time, they said, your mom and I talked about it, and if it would help you guys, since you're seriously dating and you're young and you're going to school and you could save money, you could both live here and not have to rent a place. So then my boyfriend moved in with us.
That's incredible. I wish everybody had that sort of fortunate. Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So.
And on a hilarious side note to that is incredible, by the way. But on a hilarious side note, Samuel, and this is part of why my coming out story is so complicated, and I can't just tell it in one, block by block, because I've went through so many phases. But there was a point around 9/11 when my parents were homeless. They were living with me, and Jay came to live with us. Isn't that right, Jay? You joined the party. And so the awkwardness of that whole thing is that my mom literally, wants to play Susie Homemaker and, would bake like eggs and bacon and stuff and be like, is Jordan awake now? So I swear to God, I think she went all out to try to impress you. So it was just an interesting dynamic that at one period of my life, I had my homeless parents in one room, I had Jay in another. It was all kinds of fun.
Wow. All the connections
your brother was there
channel come through.
Hey, Brandon, your brother
was there at
the same time, yeah?
Oh, I'm sorry, say again?
Your brother was there at the same time?
Yes. So it was me and my brother, my parents in one room, Jay, and then, of course, as history recalls, that's when we started writing and producing our film Emptyland. So things just sort of went from there, and the rest is in the history books or in the transcript.
That's awesome.
Jay, it's your turn. Please tell us a little bit about your family and friends and how they reacted to your coming out, beyond what you've already elaborated on.
Well, most of my friends, which was a very small circle, I was pretty antisocial growing up. I didn't get along very well with a lot of people, including my teachers, 9 times out of 10 because I knew more than they did. But the friends that I did have, they pretty much already knew, so it wasn't that big of a surprise. As I said, my family pretty much, they had suspected for a long time, but it had never been confirmed. I do distinctly remember visiting my grandmother, and as I previously mentioned, she was going through chemotherapy at the time that all this, transpired. And she was sitting on the couch, wrapped up in a blanket, sick as a dog, with a bucket next to her chair, and she looked at me with these pleading eyes, and she asked, "Is it true?" And I couldn't lie to her. I said, "Yes, it is." And I remember her just kind of looking up towards the ceiling and then down at the floor, and she just slowly shook her head, and she said, Okay. And, it really hasn't been an issue. One thing she does worry about is, the media, what's the word I'm looking for? They sensationalize the gay community as being some sort of promiscuous cesspool. And I'm like, I've been to straight bars more than I've been to gay bars, and it's the same environment. There are people picking up skanks left and right. Doesn't matter where you are. So trying to allay the fears of, my contracting something or, whatever has been the biggest struggle. Trying to show her that, no, I can be a man. I can, be a functional human being. And because I don't go to the gay clubs. I don't go to the gay bars, and there aren't any here anyway. I prefer to drink at home because if I'm going to make an ass out of myself, I'd prefer to do it in front of people I know, and it's a whole lot cheaper anyway. So I understand that there is a culture out there, but it just seems to be so pushed as that's what we are, and it's not true. It's not true, but it puts the butts in the seats and the eyes on the screen, and it's unfortunate. But I think slowly but surely we're challenging that and succeeding in defeating the stereotype of, what we see in the San Francisco Pride Parade, which is a bit of debauchery and hello Sodom and Gomorrah. But it's a progress. It's a process, and we're making progress.
So today, 2015, current context, where do you and your family stand today in 2015?
Oh, they introduced my husband as my husband.
Okay.
They don't shy away from that. It's like, oh no, this is Jordan and his husband. It's just
all right.
How it is.
They've come around. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you have to understand, Brandon. I was raised in the evangelical Christian church back through the 80s and 90s when the AIDS crisis and the gay cancer and all that stuff. But now that church has it's almost turned a 180, and they want anybody and everybody is welcome. And the current pastor, because the one I grew up with recently retired, he's awesome. His wife actually admitted to me that she had a crush on a woman when she was in college. So she completely understands. She's one of my biggest advocates. And the new pastor is a younger man, completely welcoming of myself and my husband, shakes our hand, asks us how we're doing, doesn't say, I'm going to pray for you, which is what they used to do. But it's like, no, how are you doing? What have you been up to? And it's a very welcoming environment, and I am a believer. So, I mean, it's very fascinating and exciting to see how wonderfully and positively things have changed over the past 10 years. I mean, it's been so rapid. It's mind-blowing. But I'm proud of people for standing up and finally saying enough is enough, and people are people and love is love.
Excellent. Now, I'm just in regard to my family, And Jay was there, honestly, for some of it around the 2001, 2002 era. But that was probably the second or third bout of coming out. That's, like I said, my story is complicated. So just to set the stage for you guys, in 2000, my brother and I got an apartment. It was our first bachelor pad. We broke away from the family. We were independent. It was my bachelor pad. Online dating and meeting gays and all of that was something that I was just getting into. And so I loved it. I loved every second of having that bachelor pad. And then, unfortunately, something really terrible happened in our family. There was a death in the family, and my parents became homeless. And we didn't even have the intention of rescuing them, but they basically landed in our living room. So you have to understand, I was dating guys, having promiscuous gay sex. It was my first bachelor pad, and then all of a sudden my parents were in my home. So it was a disaster. So it literally came down to, a guy would knock at the door, me open the door, and somewhere in the process of just trying to quickly take him through that living room, it's like my parents would want to talk to the guy and ask questions. It's like, well, what am I supposed to come out and say here? This is so-and-so that I don't even know his last name, and we're going to my bedroom now. I mean, it just was the epitome. Yeah, it was the epitome of awkwardness, and somewhere within those few months, as you well know, Jay, you moved in, and you became a part of that household, and so I know you understand because you saw it on the front line. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then where did we go? Here's a true story. Jay and I ultimately had to escape that setting, and then we went to live with someone else briefly, which was a gay couple, and then we lived briefly for a few months with them while we made a secret backup plan, which was to get a new apartment in the same building and then sign that apartment over to my parents. So it took several months, and it all happened over Christmas in order to make the great escape. And then when I basically handed the keys to that apartment to my parents and said, hey, you're no longer homeless, this is your apartment, the landlord has signed it over to you, they freaked out, and that's the famous moment where my mother said to me, I hope that your friends do a good job spoon-feeding you when you're dying of AIDS, Brandon.
Oh.
And I know you weren't there. I know you didn't see that, but that happened on the day I gave them the keys. And then the next thing that happened, we got the upstairs apartment, and it was game on, and we started producing Empty Lane, and that was the next 2 years of our life. And guess what? My parents kept that apartment for 5 years. They actually did stay there. So flash forward to after all of this, they ultimately did attend my wedding in 2004, but I honestly will have continual clashes with my father as it comes to homosexuality. He is an evangelical, and it's just part of his makeup. It's part of his religious upbringing. And I'm a Christian, so I understand that. But I think that he's accepting as he possibly can be, and rather than throw him under the bus, I want to give him kudos for the level of acceptance that he has shown. My mother is, I'd have to call her 100% accepting at this point. In contrast to her spoon-feeding comment. I mean, she's pulled a full circle in 10 years, so let's give Mom a huge, bit of appreciation for evolving on her views in some of the same ways that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, they've changed their views as more people give them feedback,
See, my great-grandmother, she recently turned 98 years old, about a month ago. And there was a day when I asked her what she thought about it, my being gay, that is. And she said, sweetheart, I was born during the Depression. I lived through World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, JFK's assassination. I don't think that your being gay matters one spit in the bucket, just so long as you're happy. Now, that's a 98-year-old woman saying that. Now, I understand there's a bit of a bias as I am her great-grandchild. But to hear that, those affirming words, and my grandfather, the one I've been taking care of, and my husband and I have been taking care of, he doesn't care. He knows. He's like, whatever, so long as you're happy. So, I mean, the mindset is changing that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. So I'm glad to see the progress on that.
Great. Samuel, want to bring you back into the conversation. I definitely don't want you to feel left out, buddy. So I'm gonna hit you with questions 6 and 7 together, lightning round. Did your coming out lead to any changes in your life, or did it create any series of events once you came out? And then the other question is, did religion play any role in the upbringing of your home or how you came out? So did it change your life when you came out, and was religion a factor in your household at all?
It changed everything. No, I mean, to be honest, it changed maybe vocabulary. Like I said, I was learning about my own experience as I went, and then I was trying to keep everybody informed as I did. And I think over time, everybody in my life who cared for me went down their own path and accumulated information and would bring it back as a means to relate to me, understand me, respect me, and then respect and understand everybody around them who are different in any way. So I think it changed that. I think my experience has enabled everybody around me who's not queer to maybe have a glimpse of what that meant. And, there are a lot of stereotypes attached to all of that still. And so I think you learn. I think that's what really changed. In regards to my relating with my family, it really didn't. I was able to tell my mom first because I've always had a really good communicative relationship with her. And with my dad, it was bumpy, just like it was before. And my sister has always been a supporter, and she's always, this is a girl who used to beat up boys who teased me when we were young. So, she's that type of person, that type of sister. So I don't think it really changed. And then I was brought up in a very religious culture, but not necessarily my family. So I think for me, my experience was, with my dad, it was touch and go really with his own stuff. But overall, I think that I saw myself prioritized over any religious teaching. So it was never a thing that people referred to like, well, this was said about homosexuality and it's wrong. It was like, oh, how can we make sure that you're happy? So that was definitely not something that affected me directly. It probably affected me out in the world. But thankfully, like I said, I was brought up in South America and I was thinking of all these different things there, but I didn't really come out until I was in the United States. And I think that the cultural aspect here was slightly different where I was. And the religious thing didn't really directly affect me. It probably pushed a lot of people away from me who maybe thought that me being gay was an issue, but I never directly knew that. So yeah, that's how I take that lightning around.
Yeah. Now, on a frightening side note, you guys, I just got a text message from my father. It just says the word call, like call now. So isn't that sort of disturbing? It's almost like he knows I'm talking about him.
Yeah, he heard you. He heard you.
Jay, do you remember, Jay played the piano at my wedding. In the wedding video, the photographer does a full pan across the crowd, as it were, and she noticed that my dad is not looking or paying any attention, that he has a Bible open and he's going page by page. And so not only does she make a big example out of it, but she zooms the camera in on him to literally show that he's there going page by page. So we must give him credit. He attended my wedding, but he appeared to pay no attention, that he read the Bible the whole time. So that was my wedding day experience. And all right, I'll admit this on air, but never tell them I told you this. My mom admitted to us years later that because he refused to go to my wedding, she threatened to divorce him if he didn't go to my wedding. And the next thing we knew, he showed up as a surprise guest. I was like, oh, wow, I have my father's full support. He's here to watch me get married. Find out years later it was a divorce threat that brought him to the church. Gotta love the family. Okay, so this one's really personal, and either of you absolutely have the right to abstain from this next question, but I'm going to start. So the question is, was suicide something that you have ever contemplated or attempted, and what advice would you give to LGBTQIA youth today who may be contemplating? Samuel, let's start with you.
That has never really been a part of my experience. I have never gotten to a point where I've thought about suicide myself or contemplated it. I've been around a lot of people, queer and otherwise, at young ages that have gone through that, so I've sort of lived vicariously through them in those experiences. So for me, it really is about looking at all the factors. I know that whichever age we are, we're sort of experiencing ourselves in a bubble of sorts, and it's very easy to dramatize something that maybe is not that big of a deal. And so I always think, don't make any rash decisions in a moment of passion. Sort of sleep on it, I always say, and that way things will sort of dissipate at their own pace, and they won't be so overwhelming. But I think that the issue that has rarely been discussed when it comes to suicide and just that struggle in living in the world in which we do is a conversation of death itself. Death is not the enemy. Death is not something that should be feared, but we're sort of built that way. And I think it would really help people who are struggling to talk about those things and normalize it, because we're all, in some way, shape, or form, whether we want to think that we can plan it or control it, is going to happen to us. And I think that creates maybe more anxiety when you're depressed or when you're not feeling your best or when you feel attacked and not strong. So I think that's something that could help. But I always say, sleep on it. Things won't seem so big probably when you're not feeling it in the moment. But for me, fortunately, I haven't really gone through that struggle personally, but I've seen a lot of people go through it. And, sometimes I understand, and sometimes I wish that individuals saw their potential and could tap into their own happiness, because for some people, I think it makes sense, but some people kind of fall through the cracks unnecessarily, and I think that they wouldn't if they had the tools. So, I don't know. Normalize death and sleep on it. That's a good advice for me.
Sure. And of course, we've seen the sad statistics about the high rates of LGBT, queer youth suicide. I just want to make sure that we're giving out this number continuously. The Trevor Project's Lifeline number for our listeners is 866-488-7386. Once again, Trevor Project's Lifeline is at 866-488-7386. Special Agent Jay, I know it's a very personal question, and it's always a difficult decision when we value life, when we've hit such a low point and maybe contemplating the end. What are your thoughts, and have you ever experienced those emotions in your life at any point?
Well, as Lieutenant Commander Data once said, he considered it for 0.068 seconds, and that's about how long it's ever been. Because to me, in my perspective, suicide is probably one of the most, if not the most, selfish act one can commit. I choose to fight. And no matter how painful, the bumps and bruises are along the road, I think we all become better for it and stronger because of it. And yes, I would encourage anybody who has any doubt to call and just talk to someone, because there are people willing to listen. I'm one of them. So, just stick around, you're going to miss the show if you do check out a little early, because, come on, man, we're going to have some awesome earthquakes and volcanoes going off for the next few years. You don't want to miss that. Awesome stuff. So I may have to duck out on you a little early here, Brandon, because I have a bus to catch. Got to get to my grandfather's house.
we're right here at the end. I'll try to wrap her up. So in my experience, in all honesty, I had an experience in my late teens, early 20s where there was a terrible misunderstanding in a situation, and I thought that it was going to turn into a police matter, which, as we know, once that snowball effect starts happening, turns into judges and courtrooms and jail, and I catastrophized a certain situation to the extreme in my mind, and I felt like I couldn't survive it and my life was over. So I hate to admit this on the radio, but in my late teens and early 20s, I made a serious suicide attempt, which I survived, and I am so thankful, and I love life to its extreme ever since. And it was a mistake, and it was a dark time in my life, but things like the resources that we see today with the It Gets Better and the Trevor Project weren't around then. You would have to reach out to your immediate circle of friends or family, you know? But, I just hit that point once, and I've moved past it, and I will do whatever I can now to support anyone now that's feeling those feelings and share my story and just reaffirm how important life is, and that I will always be thankful that I'm here to live life, and I want to see everyone else do the same.
Well, that's excellent. I wanted to let you know, actually my husband wanted to let you know that he emailed you his coming out story, so you might want to post a link to that to your page.
Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate send your regards to your husband for us.
Of course.
Okay. Well, since you have to wrap up, let's just go to the very end here. Open forum. Is there anything more that either of you would like to say about your coming out story or advice to those in the community that are coming out here for Coming Out Day?
I think all that has been said. I think that if people are seeking support and community, they can, and the three of us are available, and other people are available out there to do that work and to be present and to assist in any way. I think that it's safe to say that our journey is not a one-person journey, and we're all here to support each other when we need it. So whether it's one of those phone lines or one of us through social media or personally, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to people and share your story. Sometimes it seems awful, but it might be the case that we're all going to laugh about it at some point, and it's nice to have that availability. So that's my take.
Thank you, Samuel. Jay?
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's important to talk about it because you really never know. This isn't our parents' world anymore, and you will see jock frat guys jump into a fight to break up some homophobic attack. And, I personally witnessed that here in Podunk, Corvallis. So the world has changed, and, there are open ears. They may not completely understand, but they're willing to listen. And that's, I think, the crucial part is someone needs to hear it, and they need to get it out. And perhaps that friend knows a friend that can help them. But, yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you both so much, Samuel and Jay, for sharing your coming out stories. It really is meaningful and personable to hear them directly from you, both to get to know you better and for the listeners to get to know all of us better. And I just want to give a sincere thank you to the Trevor Project for all that you are doing and for working with us specifically on National Coming Out Day. We're glad to work with the Trevor Project on this.
Yes.
Okay, you've been listening to Gay News Radio. Once again, your panelists have been Samuel, Laura, and Special Agent Jay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and have a good day.
This is GNR, Gay News Radio.